Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. Hey, all you minties! Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for your advanced look at the Excalibur Omnibus Volume 3 from Marvel Comics. That's right, it is finally coming out. So let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. Now, before going any further, a big thank you to David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advance copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on September 23rd or 24th, depending on where you get your books. So what we're looking at here is the direct market cover. This is the one that's supplied by Joe Madureira. On the left-hand side is your standard edition cover, and that is the one that is supplied by Anthony Wynn. Both of them having Nightcrawler on the spine, but of course portrayed by different artists. You have Carlos Pacheco on the spine of the standard edition, and you have Ken Lashley on the spine of the direct market cover. But everything underneath the direct market cover or standard edition dust jacket is the same. So, bringing it back to this. So this is the image from Excalibur 71, the one that came with the little card, the holographic card. It was so cool, of Nightcrawler, also drawn by Joe Mad. But this does show the fight against a former friend, and guest starring some characters from the X-Men, but also drawn by Joe Mad. Marvel Omnibus, Excalibur logo, Volume 3. This does have the new Excalibur logo, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look to your 2 other Excalibur volumes. But they've done that before with, like, New Mutants. If you see over there, New Mutants logo changed after Volume 1. So they're just using the most modern cover for the series. And then, of course, that image of Nightcrawler down there. And then, Dark Days for Excalibur. That's right, we have like a new Hellfire Club era here. It all changes as Captain Britain and Cerise are ripped from the team. Yeah, there's a lot of changes, that's for sure. And we'll talk more about that here in a few. Here's the covers of the issues collected in here. And then the ISBN, the Marvel logo, and the retail price being $150. Now, underneath the dust jacket, actually, let's look at the flaps here. Putting the X into Excalibur. Actually, that is a great way to describe this era. And then the creators right here. Like Richard Ashford taking the top billing, Chris Cooper, Todd DeZago, Warren Ellis, Scott Lobdell, Evan Skolnick, Richard Bennett, just to name a few. But mainly the artist that I remember in this era was Carlos Pacheco. That is the artist that I remember in this era the most. And I believe Casey Jones drew some, but we'll look at that together. Here we have this image by Carlos Pacheco of Colossus, Shadowcat, and Nightcrawler. I'm surprised they didn't use a Nightcrawler for this spine right there. And then more Carlos Pacheco. I really like this issue. This is the one where they go to another world, if you will. Or actually, Kitty Pryde goes to another world. Now, we are going to go ahead and crack this book open and talk about the stories found in here. Check out this beautiful artwork, because there's a lot of that during this particular era. But this is also, interesting enough, the era that I stopped reading comics. So we're looking at Onslaught, we're going to look at Post-Onslaught, and we're going to look at some miniseries. And most of this, like 90% of this book has never been collected in oversized format, nor some of it hasn't been collected in Epic Collection yet. All right, let's go ahead and start. All right, let's go ahead and crack this big book open. You have these orange, red end sheets there. Interesting that the image they use from Anthony Wynn for the standard edition cover is also used as the title page art. And then here are all the credits. So we are going to go through some changes for Excalibur. And this piece by Ken Lashley, I really enjoy that story. And then your table of contents right here. But let's give credit where credit is due. I like to call this era the Scott Lobdell, let's bring Excalibur back to the X-Men. But I really like what they said in the dust jacket. This is, I think, the best way to describe this era. Putting the X into Excalibur. You know, Alan Davis is gone, so they needed a new writer. But also the Warren Ellis era. So you have a lot of Scott Lobdell, even though he's just plotting. Some of the script is actually done by like Dan Slott and Evan Skolnick and Richard Ashford. Richard Ashford coming in for the story as well, too. So it's not just Scott Lobdell and Warren Ellis, but it's mainly those two. And as far as the pencils, it is Ken Lashley, it is Casey Jones, and it is Carlos Pacheco that do take the top billing for this particular book. Kevin Conrad, Harry Candelario, Don Hudson, Cam Smith are some of your inkers. But, I mean, just look at how many inkers there are. Like Mike S. Miller and Bob Wyzek and Tom Simmons, Al Milgram, and just so many. Jimmy Palmiotti. And then your colorists, Dana Morsehead, Mike Thomas, and Glynis Oliver. And then your lettering down here by Janice Chang, Chris Alepolis, and Luis Bubalis, and Pat Brosin. Now, we move on to the table of contents. So, we kick it off with Excalibur Annual Number 1. Never been collected before. And it is the introduction of Chaos. Alright, so what does this collect? Let's talk about the collection in here. So, we do have Excalibur Annual Number 1 and Annual Number 2. But we also have the continuation of Excalibur with issue number 68 all the way to 103. X-Men Unlimited number 4, which I think is a very, very important issue for the stories going on in here. X-Factor 106. X-Force number 38, which is the life science part of the Phalanx Covenant storyline, so it makes sense to be collected in here. The crossover with X-Men number 12, Pride and Wisdom 1 through 3, which is kind of like the tail end of the Warren Ellis era. And then material for Marvel Comics Presents number 174 and Marvel Holiday Special 1996. The book has 1,320 pages and retails for $150. And I am so glad they collected that Marvel Comics Presents issue. I mean, it's only 8 pages, but I love that they put a lot of thought into the mapping, because that's something that I completely left out. So Chaos is this character that was introduced through this annual. He is sort of has ties to Cerise, who won't be staying long, unfortunately. Neither will the rest of these classic UK characters, or made by Chris Claremont and, of course, Alan Davis. There's a little backup story here that features this knight that goes on a quest, but also features TechNet and Gatecrasher, and then we move on to the main story. Again, we have a cover by Joe Mad. I did try to get Marvel to see if they could add the Starjammers miniseries by Carlos Pacheco and Warren Ellis, but instead it's going to be added to the Prelude to Onslaught Volume 1. The Road to Onslaught Omnibus Volume 1. Alright, in the aftermath of the last issue, where we end on a happy note, it's like, hey, everybody, we're going off on our own, and Alan Davis is leaving, so we'll take a snapshot of everybody being happy. Why is everybody looking so gloomy and mad and just leaving Excalibur at the very beginning? Well, because Alan Davis left. And we have a new writer, Scott Lobdell. This is, I think, the script is by Dan Slott. So in this particular issue, it's like you're mourning the loss of somebody while some people are leaving. Cerise gets brought to trial by the Starjammers. So they're trying to hold her accountable for some murder that she committed. Pharaon, you end up losing like characters like Pharaon and Kylun, Widget, and it just seems like, okay, so Scott Lobdell just wants to focus on the X-Men characters during this time, so that's what we're gonna do. And, some of my favorites end up leaving the book, the ones that I really enjoyed, and it does change the tone of the story. Now, if you were loving X-Men during this time, this is the perfect book for you. Because when people ask me, what do I think of Excalibur 1 and 2, like Omni's Fun and 2, and I'm always honest, it's fun. It's a hell of a lot of fun. And there's some good stories in there. But if you're expecting Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men, or even Louise Simonson's X-Factor, it is a completely different story. They were doing their own thing in the Pocket universe that they belonged to for a while, even though they weren't really. Well, they did go through the time cross caper. Anyway, but this is like, okay, we're going to tie these characters back to the X-Men. So much so that, they're immediately part of a crossover, which is the Fatal Attractions crossover. And in Fatal Attractions, of course, is the return of Magneto. He ends up taking some acolytes. And one of the acolytes that he takes is, of course, Colossus. So he has a confrontation which, breaks Kitty's heart. He's leaving the X-Men again to go and join Magneto. And, well, that causes all kinds of ruckus in that relationship. And during this time, we also have a missing Brian Braddock. By the way, I love Matthew Ryan's art. I don't think he drew enough. Maybe he wasn't fast enough. This issue, My goodness, we have Derek Robertson, Ken Lashley, and Matthew Ryan. Seems like not only were we going through different writers and scripters, but we were going through different artists and inkers. Richard Ashford comes in for the head writer. So this is the one that ties it into the Game Masters game, the Upstarts game that they have. So we have Sienna Blaze coming in shortly after she premiered in the pages of X-Men Unlimited #1. So she's this new villain. She's part of the Upstarts. And again, now the team is basically Shadowcat, Nightcrawler, and Phoenix, Rachel. Because Megan is still mourning the disappearance of Brian Braddock, and we don't know where he is, because at the very beginning, Megan's just sitting there mourning him, and you're like, wait a minute, did I miss something? You didn't. It's just the way comics are done back then. We have the introduction of this new character named Rory Campbell, who has like this white stripe down. I just did that on my head, and you can't see me on film. Who has a white stripe running down his hair. This is an Ian Churchill fill-in issue. Now, the team not only has changed in the status quo, but also they changed in where they're located. They have moved on to now Muir Island, so they are hanging out with Moira McTaggart. And some of the villains that were kidnapped, or captured rather, like Spoo, from the Acolytes. This issue right here, I remember when I was a kid, really confused. I wasn't a kid, I was in high school when this was coming out. Did have like a sparkly cover right here. Rachel as Phoenix for the last time. Right. Until the next time. Where they're trying to find Brian Braddock, and Brian Braddock finally appears, but he calls himself Britannic. When I was younger, I thought, oh man, it's Phoenix and Captain Britain mixed together. We got a new character name. No, it wasn't that. You can find out what happens. This is a very underrated story. I really enjoyed this one. This is I think it's called We All Have Our Crosses to Bear. I just remember that line. A demon went to church on Tuesday. Written by Jim Krueger, who of course is known for his Earth X series, but drawn by the phenomenal Tim Sell. Richard Starking's doing the lettering, and Gregory Wright doing the colors. It is a beautiful confessional story because, Nightcrawler, he's Catholic. Even through this entire run, when there's demons, there's time travel, there's intergalactic space monsters that they have to fight, it doesn't matter. Like, deep down inside, he still has his beliefs. All right, so here we finally have some clarification as to the true lineage of Nightcrawler. But not just Nightcrawler, also the character of Rogue. So Rogue plays a little bit of a guest star here, but yes, it is the story of Mystique, and perhaps, the whole thing has been asked. When we were kids, it was like, oh, it's because they have blue skin, they're related. Yeah, I think they really took it to heart. They're like, oh yeah, we totally meant to do that. Of course. Yes. we had that plan from the beginning. I don't think, honestly, I don't know, at least for Nightcrawler, I don't think that's what Claremont had planned at first. I'm sure later on it changed. But this does have a new origin for the character of Nightcrawler, because, we were so used to his mom being, what is her name, Margali? Is it Margali Zardos, I think is her name? Margali Zardos, maybe that's how you don't pronounce it. I don't know, but that's the way I pronounce it. Speaking of, hey, she shows up in this issue along with Despair and Amanda Sefton. So now we're having some new characters come in. The status quo is changing. Rory's still there. Lockheed makes a reappearance. But unfortunately, Phoenix leaves. But we do have Britannic. Nightcrawler's still there. And Shadowcat. But we have Amanda Sefton coming in, calling herself Day Tripper. And she will add this supernatural element to the team. And of course, still crushing on Nightcrawler because, they've been together for so long. This is another story that goes back into Nightcrawler's past. Kind of a it is really a follow-up to that issue of X-Men Unlimited. I didn't point this out, but Richard Bennett did the artwork in here. And I remember he did the guide to the X-Mansion, and his mechanics and like his buildings and his danger room and all that was beautiful. So I was really looking forward to him drawing this issue. I remember his panels were a little hard for me to follow as a kid, and when I reread this a few years back, yeah, they're still a little bit hard to follow. He fills out every panel. Sometimes you need to leave a little open space, a little room to breathe. But Amanda Sefton coming back was just a nice addition to the team. Now, the next story arc is the Douglock Chronicles. Is that what it's called? Yeah, the Douglock Chronicles, which is this character named Douglock. And if you've read New Mutants, well, maybe you can put 2 and 2 together. I'm not going to spoil who exactly it is. Is it truly Douglas Ramsey and Warlock put together like we all guessed when Rain scattered the ashes of Warlock on Doug's grave after the Extinction Agenda? We were waiting for that. Or is it something else? Is it just part of the Phalanx? And speaking of Phalanx, that's exactly what this leads into. We get to see our villains that are behind the Phalanx, and the buildup is there that it leads directly into the crossover, the Phalanx Covenant. This is a little bit of a backup issue right here with... Oh, man. It's a little bit of a backup regarding the characters of Brian and the relationship between Kate and this new Douglock, but also this strong relationship between Professor Xavier and Moira McTaggart. There's a big revelation that happens in the previous arc that it just breaks Professor X's heart because there's nothing he can do about it. That leads into the Phalanx. I'm sorry. Sometimes I go on about every issue. It's just fun to go and relive these stories. And it's weird when I say that because I'm like, it's so fun. But this is also the era that I was like, I think I've had enough of X-Men. I'll give it one more year to straighten up. Well, they did not. So I hope you're enjoying this era. So this is the beginning of the Phalanx Covenant. This is the crossover. It is interesting how they did it. Like, there was a crossover between X-Force and X-Factor and Excalibur. It was like they were on their own thing. Wolverine and Cable were doing their own mission. And then you had Uncanny and Adjectiveless, which introduced us to Generation X. But this goes into the heart of the Phalanx Covenant. And it introduces us to this new character. Now, I really liked the design, especially when Ken Lashley drew this guy. This is Shinar. And then there are the bad guys behind this. The one thing I will say about the Executioner song that I enjoyed, Phalanx Covenant, was Lobdell had a way of building up stories, like prolonging the stories and giving you hints as what's to come. And there was one particular issue of Uncanny in the 280s that he was foreshadowing something that doesn't truly get resolved until the Phalanx Covenant. So in a way, it was like Chris Claremont, that was his writing style. He was writing for the long game. This is Tony S. Daniel. Oh, man, did I love this era. It was like X-Force was blessed with these two magnificent artists. You had Greg Capullo, and then you had Tony S. Daniel. Especially when you had Kevin Conrad on inks. Oh man, they were wonderful. And then there's this guy named Todd McFarlane that's like, hey, those guys are good. I'm going to take them. And he did. But then we got like Adam Polina, who's phenomenal in his own way. Jim Chung. Jim Chung is such a great artist. One of my favorites. But this is... pretty much what happens is that the Phalanx has abducted some of the mutants, and they're in this, like, perfect little town. So it's up to the rest of X-Factor, X-Force, and Excalibur to go and rescue their friends. And it's like this huge fight between the remaining members, the members that have been taken over by the Phalanx, and then, of course, the Phalanx, like, the main hive itself. This is Excalibur. I want to censor that final picture, or the final page of the story there. This is Annual Volume 2. I want to say this is a Dan Panosian piece, but man, his art style has completely gone bonkers. It is so good these days. I saw a Conan piece he did, and I was blown away. This is the story of Jamie and Brian and Betsy reconnecting, and yeah, Jamie is the Braddock brother that neither one of them really talk about because he's just nuts and, well, he did a lot of horrible things early on. And then you have people like Eric Fine and Derek Groves drawing and writing these stories. This is Amanda Sefton, like a solo story here. And I'm glad that they're tying up loose ends, what happened when Fitzroy was torturing Black Queen, Selene. So I love the fact that, this era is connected with X-Men, but also like... oh man, I liked when Excalibur was by itself. Change of Worlds is a letter from Kitty's mom, and she gets this file. It's a floppy disk. That's right, floppy disk. What is this cloud nonsense? Doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a cloud. But she's looking at the files of like New Mutants, kind of like a way to catch up on these characters that have appeared recently, like Doug and maybe Warlock. Yes, this issue right here. I'm so glad it's collected. Even the cover. But this is written by Skip Dietz and Paco Diaz, who went on to do Deadpool. But it's just featuring a team up between Lockheed and Devil Dinosaur against TechNet. It's adorable. I'm glad it's collected. And then we get the beginning of Warren Ellis' era. And this is the Soul Sword trilogy. And it's another one of those loose ends. If you haven't read Inferno, something happens to Magic, Ileana in Inferno, and then eventually something happens in issue 303 of Uncanny X-Men to Ileana, and the Soul Sword, she promised her friend, if something were to ever happen to her, would be transferred over to Kitty Pryde, and that's what's happening here in this trilogy, where she is gaining these particular powers now and learning to use the Soul Sword. And I thought, man, what an awesome story. So not only is Kitty Pryde looking a little more menacing, but she is evil. There's some dialogue in here that you're going to be like, that doesn't sound like her. Well, she's being possessed. Whenever you're dealing with a sword, a demon sword. So, yeah, the Soul Sword is not something that comes from heaven, really. Or maybe it is. Maybe it's been retconned. But we are introduced to a couple new villains here. Or maybe they're not villains. Shrill and Grave Moss. That's the other guy's name. And again, Amanda Sefton, Day Tripper, playing a huge part in all of this. Now, this is one of my favorite issues right here. This is a flashback of training that Kitty Pryde had under Wolverine. He was teaching her how to fight, because you never know when you're going to have to fight and not be able to use your powers. Now, the issue that happens here is called Mission Genosha. Mission Genosha is the issue that happens right before Age of Apocalypse, so when everything gets crystallized. But it feels like, unlike most of the other X titles where they were like, okay, we're going to fast forward a little bit in time. This is what's going on now. Warren Ellis just kept writing the story like he was never told, we're going to skip some months because you have Excalibur with a R-E. Oh, yeah. Pete Wisdom, baby. This is when he ends up joining the team. See, this continues into Age of Apocalypse. Then we have Age of Apocalypse, and we have little pages of X-Men Prime where they were hinting at a horrible nemesis for Excalibur. But for some reason, that never really happened. At least he didn't show up in Excalibur. He ended up showing up in the pages of X-Man and then Gen X, I think. But we do get to Genosha here. But yes, back to Pete Wisdom. Pete Wisdom ends up joining the team during this time. He's this Scottish private detective, sergeant. He joined the MI6 and then later on transferred over to the secret intelligence agency known as Black Air, where they kind of they go and explore the supernatural. And he's also got powers. He's got these hot knives. He can turn his fingers into hot knives and throw them. So he's kind of like John Constantine and Gambit, I guess. He has a trench coat. Maybe that's something that I always thought. Is it because he's Scottish? Maybe. There's Spore, and Rory's still dealing with Spore, and Britannic with his long ponytail. But Kitty really has a thing for guys named Peter. No, not just this guy, but also Peter Rasputin and Peter Quill. So, just saying. Now, somebody once told me, Amanda and I were doing the review of the movie of Deadpool 2, that Peter Wisdom is in the movie. He's the Peter in the Deadpool movies. I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm really wrong. Please let me know in the comments down below. Because I really thought that he hasn't shown up in the MCU. Now, Warren Ellis, even though he was coming in with some new stories, making it a little bit darker, like this is a kind of whodunit trilogy right here. I love the fact that he was using trilogies. One of the things that was happening too is that there was a shift within the X-Men titles. So X-Factor, they lost Reign, so she came over to Excalibur. And Reign is reunited with Moira McTaggart, and I love that. There's a confrontation with her priest that, from New Mutants graphic novel number 1. This is one of my favorite cliffhangers. Like, it's not a big, whoa, what a shock. It's just like, oh, man. Wait till this Peter finds out about that Peter and his kitty right there. This is not going to go well. But then again, he left her. So, yeah, there's a big fight between Peters right here over the heart of Kitty Pryde. And she doesn't know whether to trust him or not, but he needs help. He needs to come back and redeem himself. You know, Megan's all happy that Britannic is still around. This is the confrontation with the priest I was talking about. Days of Future Tense. This is one that somebody's having this nightmare of a future. So in the way, in the tradition of Days of Future Past, or Days of Futures Yet to Come, or Days of Future Present, here we have the future British team of Psylocke, Captain Britain, Megan, and Tangerine. Oh, and then Wolfsbane, too. Who the hell is Tangerine? It's a good question. I don't think she came back. Did she come back? Anyway, there's the crossover with X-Man right here, where he's looking for answers, and of course there's a huge fight. Steve Skrow supplying the artwork for X-Man. Beautiful artwork. And then Carlos Pacheco officially joining Excalibur as their new ongoing artist. And this is my favorite era of his art. I know a lot of people really enjoy his Aerosmith, or when he went on to do the Camelot Falls with Superman, but I love this super dynamic era of his artwork. And I can't believe I'm talking about him in past tense. It's so weird because, you know, to me, Carlos Pacheco's young. It doesn't make any sense. Nightcrawler getting a new look because of Amanda Sefton. She's like, hey, you know, I met this guy what was it? It's like, I met a guy at an airport. He was pretty hot. I think you should shave your head. And he was like, oh, yeah, that sounds about right. More secrets of Douglock. And now we get to see a little bit more of that Black Air playing a part in this. But not only that, we get the introduction of a new threat to Excalibur and possibly the X-Men. And that is the Hellfire Club. The British Hellfire Club. And we're introduced to a Red Queen, a Red King, a new Black Queen, Emma Steed. There's also the Black King, Quentin Templeton. There's the Red Rook, whose name is Scribe, and they're really trying to burn London down. Like, so it goes for Muir Island and London for this particular adventure. As a matter of fact, even issue 100 of Excalibur, so this issue ties into Onslaught. So this is Onslaught Impact 1. So they want to burn London down, and the tie-in is really the Xavier protocols. You know, Moria has access to them, so if you read it, you can find out what the Xavier protocols are. We have the aftermath of, you know, the Excalibur wondering what to do. And the aftermath, this issue is actually my final issue of Excalibur. And I didn't get to read the rest until I came back to comics in 2002. I left comics for a while, mainly because of Onslaught, but I think it was more of a, yeah, I think I'm just done. I need a break. This isn't doing it for me anymore. But there's always been a part of me that missed the X-Men. Now, yeah, this is the final Warren Ellis issue, I want to say. And it's the one where Kitty Pryde wakes up and everything looks different. Carlos Pacheco's applying that artwork, and this is where you get different variations of the characters. Then we move on to Pride and Wisdom. Pride and Wisdom was this mini-series that focuses on the relationship between Kitty Pryde and Peter Wisdom. You know, some people like it, some people hated it. I remember people hating it, some of them at the comic book store. But this is a supernatural mystery. Again, there is a kidnapping of one of Peter Wisdom's friends, like his daughter's kidnapped, and both of them have to solve that particular crime. So the last 3 issues that are collected in here are the Pride and Wisdom series. There's also this is from the holiday special, where Kitty Pryde goes back to Chicago because there's somebody that's missing that she has to help find. And then we get some extras. Now, if you want to go and you can't wait, like there is no announcement yet of an Excalibur Volume 4, you're like, I need Excalibur! Well, that's where these 2 epic collections come in. Believe it or not, these 2 epic collections would make up Volume 4 of Excalibur Omnibus. So even collecting Excalibur Volume 2, 1 through 4, I love that. That's if you can't wait. Or maybe one day we'll get an Excalibur Omnibus Volume 4. That would be awesome to have. It's crazy, right? Like, we need a New Mutants Omnibus Volume 4. We're finally getting an X Factor by Peter David Omnibus Volume 4, but we need an Excalibur Volume 4 to wrap up this era, the Ben Raab era, you know, wrapping up those particular stories. And then the X-Men get to go back home. Now, let's look at the binding. It is sewn binding, 1,320 pages, printed at the Donnelly printer. And let's look at the paper stock they're using here. And it's the same paper stock the Donnelly printer has been using for a while. I do want to look at, right here, the way that this lays over. So you do get minor gutter loss, but really, this is a 1,320-page book. It was bound to happen, but that eye is big, so it will help, like, the more you go in here. But, like, for example, you have to hold it all the way down to see all of Brian's shoulder right there. But that is it. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors. BD Cosmos, the Canadian leader in graphic novels. They have a physical storefront in Montreal, Quebec, and their website, bdcosmos.com, offers 25% off your order of over $99 or more, and free shipping everywhere in Canada for every order of $200 or more.
Their shipping care is exceptional. Your books will stay cozy through the rough Canadian weather and arrive to you in near mint condition.
After checkout, let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way, and you'll be added to the monthly $25 gift card raffle. Entries are valid for new and returning customers.
Don't be afraid to call or email them. Ask them questions. Their staff is always happy to help guide you towards the right purchase. Visit their website, bdcosmos.com, for more. BD Cosmos, with rewards and raffles taking care of customers in Canada. Eh?
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Let me know in the comments down below if this is the way that you are collecting Excalibur, or you rather have the Epic collections, or if you even made it this far into Excalibur, or you're done with after Alan Davis, or if you just want the whole thing, you want them to continue with the Volume 4, you want them to continue with Chris Claremont's era of Excalibur and New Excalibur. But I would love to know all those answers in the comments down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Everybody stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.